70 years old. I think it still plays extraordinarily well for a 70-year-old film. Performances, black and white photography, Max Steiner score that I thought really enhanced the action that took place on screen. Originally, there was going to be a third panelist here tonight, but today I get an email, and Mr. Zachary Kamenker is really sick. I mean, like, stay at home, stay in bed, don't come out sick. So, it's up to me and this young lady who has never seen this movie before to give you a little background about how it evolved. The story was originally written by a very mysterious gentleman with the name B. Traden. It was published originally in 1929. In 1935, Warner Brothers thought it had some merit when it got translated into English. It was originally published in Germany, and when it got translated into English in the mid-30s, Warner Brothers took a liking to the story and bought the rights to it. And at the time, John Huston was working at Warner Brothers on scripts, and he became enamored of it also. And they worked on it for a few years, polishing the script, and was supposedly to start production in 1941. The war interrupted their plans, and it got sidelined. Flash forward to 1946, Warner Brothers resurrects the script, gets Huston interested, they get the cast together, and they go to Mexico and make the movie, taking their sweet time doing so, much to the dismay of Jack Warner, who was, Jack Warner had a penchant for never reading scripts. He would okay ideas, and he probably should have read this one, because when he started to see the rushes, he was not pleased. All he saw was Humphrey Bogart stumbling around with burros in a barren area looking for water. Was one particular moment that I was able to read about. It took them longer to make. They were, I think, about a good month behind schedule, and I suspect it probably cost a lot more than they had originally imagined. As you can probably tell today, not all of it was shot on location. If the film has a drawback in my mind, there's a couple of key scenes that definitely look like studio footage. But for the most part, here we are, 70 years later, marveling at a movie which, when it was released in 1948, was not a hit. Jack Warner thought it was a very prestigious picture and wrote off the loss that the film initially created. Over the course of years and a few reissues of the film, it eventually got back its negative cost, and of course it has become a film which is really well thought of.
Whoa, losing all my notes.
But now comes a very pertinent question that I'm going to pose to Miss Ellie Lambert. Pardon me for not introducing you. Ellie,
yes.
Do you watch old movies?
Not usually.
Not usually. Okay. When I asked you to do this, did you have any apprehension about what you were getting involved with?
I still do.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I was excited to do this. I've never done anything like this before, so I think that this is a great
well,
opportunity.
I hope that we're not putting you on the spot too badly, but I don't see anyone else that's stayed with us at this moment that is, nobody 18. You're it. What did you think of this stuff?
I quite enjoyed it, if I'm being honest. I thought I really understood what they were trying to portray in terms of themes such as greed and power, and I really enjoyed watching that play out.
And a definite sense of redemption here is, I think, and irony, as Walter Houston points out, gee, this is, the gold has gone back to the mountain. And it definitely has performances. You've never seen a Humphrey Bogart movie?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Maybe.
From watching this, if you were given the opportunity to ever watch another one, would you take it?
Oh, sure, definitely. I think that he showed some good skills in terms of emotion, in terms of showing his range of acting ability is pretty much what I just said, but I'm saying it again. He played the insane man well, so I would be interested to see what else he had in his repertoire.
Well, I think with the exception of perhaps a 1954 movie called The Cane Mutiny, in which Humphrey Bogart played a captain of a vessel. He was Captain Queeg. Bogart generally wasn't given to portrayals of people who were off their rocker, or at least not as bad as Fred C. Dobbs and Captain Queeg with the, I think, marbles, if I remember, it was constantly toying with marbles, but there was the deal with the, and this is going to sound really strange, if you have seen the film, which you haven't, strawberries was a key element in the Cane Mutiny, because that's what finally tipped Captain Queeg over, was missing strawberries. But anyway, Bogart had been working at Warner Brothers for about a dozen years before this was made. And he came from a background of being a stage actor in New York, and he had the good fortune of linking up with a gentleman by the name of Leslie Howard, and in the mid-30s appearing in a play called The Petrified Forest. Bogart had been in Hollywood prior to being in The Petrified Forest, but had absolutely no luck establishing any sort of an acting career in the very early 30s. And he almost didn't have the opportunity to reprise the role of a gangster by the name of Duke Mantee in The Petrified Forest, because Warner Brothers thought that another actor that they had in their stable would do a better job, and that was Edward G. Robinson. And it was only when Bogart's co-star from Broadway, who was brought to Hollywood in order to reenact his part in The Petrified Forest, Leslie Howard, said, "No Bogart, no Howard. If you want me, Bogart's going to play the role of Duke Mantee. And that was an extraordinary bit of good luck for Bogart, which he became a personality that apparently people wanted to see, because Warner Brothers inked into a considerable, I think it was a 12-year contract, which was quite extensive at that point in time. Now, granted, just because you were under contract didn't mean that you could pick and choose what you did. And if you looked at what Bogart was doing for probably the first 5 years at Warner Brothers, you might say, gee, they kind of typecast him as a very tough secondary gangster in a lot of films. Yeah. And it wasn't until 1941 when George Raft bailed from being the star of a movie called High Sierra that Bogart had the chance to actually show that he could be a sympathetic gangster. And that really created an interest in the public to see more of Bogart starring in things. And in just a short time thereafter, that opportunity arose when he joined forces with the screenwriter and director of this, John Huston, to make, it actually was a remake of a Dashiell Hammett story, The Maltese Falcon. And that really put Bogart into a category of almost being a superstar. I don't want to say overnight, because that would diminish the 4 or 5 years that he had been at Warner Brothers, slaving away, co-starring with all manner of famous personage that Warner's had under contract at the time. But that was the turning point. And then it was followed by movies like Casablanca, where he played Rick Blaine, and he received an Oscar nomination for that. And all sorts of films followed. And they were, I'm losing my place here. I should be able to remember these things by rote. Big Sleep, Key Largo, Treasure of Sierra Madre. And finally, it did move away from Warner Brothers, and he appeared in a film called In a Lonely Place, which, if you have never seen that, you'll want to see a Bogart performance that is probably one of his best. That is it. These films definitely secured him in the history of the motion picture business. And then he went on to achieve, finally, an Oscar with his performance of Charlie Allnut in a 1951 film called The African Queen, where he co-starred with Katharine Hepburn. I had the good fortune of working on Golden Pond when it was made in this state back in 1980. And one day, very uncharacteristically, Katharine Hepburn, there was something going on that created a lull in the activity, and Katharine Hepburn and the director, Mark Rydell, were talking to one another about Humphrey Bogart, and she was reminiscing about making The African Queen with Bogart, and she was saying that was a terrible movie to be involved with physically. Everybody had dysentery, everybody was sick, with the exception of John Huston and Humphrey Bogart, who had, more often than not, so much alcohol in them, germs didn't want to live in their body. Anyway, what did you think of the old man's performance? This got Walter Huston an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And by the way, It took a little conversation to get Walter to play the part without his teeth. Initially didn't want to do it, but I think that just added to his grizzled and experienced and aging persona, and was the right thing to do, even though it may not have been something that most people, I think only Walter Brennan was another actor who used to have in his contract, with or without. It didn't go beyond that. It just check one off. Do you want me with my teeth or not? Anyway, were you impressed with that performance?
Oh, sure. I felt that a lot of them were, not just his, but a lot of them were very authentic. That could be just good casting, that could just be my my lack of exposure, I guess, to films from this time, but I do feel as though they did quite a good job, and I think that he did quite a good job as well. I think he did deserve it.
Walter Huston was known for being probably an actor who portrayed some famous figures. He was in a film called Mission to Moscow, where he played an ambassador, a real-life ambassador to Russia. And I would assume it was with in that role. Also, he got an Oscar nomination for being in a very prestigious film called Dodsworth, which was based on a Broadway play. And the other thing, I'm forgetting right at this moment what where it was going, but Huston definitely had a career in which he was quite playing important people and playing people who were meaningful in literature and also in plays that were adapted that he starred. The third member of the trio of prospectors was a fellow by the name of Tim Holt. And Tim Holt was the son of a rather popular actor in the 1920s and 30s by the name of Jack Holt. And you would never know it, but Jack Holt